Ladies and gentlemen, we are back to Mortal Kombat Harder. And we're in the meat hive.
Yeah, indeed.
Why giant bees? Bees, my god.
You know, of all the giant insect varieties, giant bees are probably one of the least scary, because bees only have one thing that they attack you with, and that's their stinger. Like, with a giant...
Well, I mean...
ants, for example, and I think we see giant ants later in the story, the ant can grab you, you know?
Well, I mean, a giant bee with, a stinger the size of a spear would probably kill you if it got the chance.
Yeah, but that's, like, no different than other giant monster varieties. The thing about insects that makes them creepy, and therefore makes giant insects creepy, is that you're taking all the weird things about insects and making them large enough to be a threat to a human. And that's inherently a scary thing. Hi, Chronica. You look like you just walked out of Detroit Become Human. And she does.
David Cage is such a visionary. Can we talk about that?
Also, how convenient of you to take up a name based off of our God of Time.
I appeared in a form your mortal brain could understand.
So
you turned into an android?
So between parts, I actually had a thought regarding our earlier little conversation about the fan service in Mortal Kombat 9 and the lack of it in 10 and 11. And it reminds me of something else, actually. It reminds me of the Witcher series, oddly.
Really? I've never played that.
In The Witcher 1, because it was the first game in the series, and they're doing this big, ambitious RPG series based on these Polish books that at the time weren't particularly successful internationally, they kind of leaned hard into the sex appeal stuff, more so than the two games that came after it. Basically, all the female characters had their chests hanging out really unimaginatively. And in the games that followed, because they were...
Sorry, he's looking up his IMDb. Sorry, I just had to point that out.
Huh?
If you look at his monitor, Johnny was actually looking up his IMDb.
That is such a Johnny Cage thing.
Sorry, please continue.
He's looking at his career, trying to see how successful he is in the future. I didn't notice that before. That's great.
I recognize you.
See, there it is there.
I recognize you. You're Vanilla Ice.
That's actually a cool juxtaposition, because when Sonya looks at her future files on the computer, she's looking into how she died, and here Johnny Cage is just looking into what movies he starred in.
Yeah. Sorry, that was my Tony Stark. That man is playing Galaga moment. Please continue.
Okay, so. What was I saying? Oh yeah, The Witcher. After the first game was successful, Witchers 2 and 3 didn't really feel a need to hammer in the sex appeal, even though they both had like copious amounts of sex scenes in them. Their overall aesthetic became a lot more grounded and realistic, which I always took as a sign that the developers were more confident that they didn't have to appeal to the lowbrow crowd anymore. And it's especially true of The Witcher 3, which looks very... realistic and down to earth for the most part. It has some really great sex scenes in it, don't get me wrong. But the costume design, much like this game and 11, is more focused on making characters that you can take seriously. Which, I like it when it's done well, if a game can project that kind of confidence. Because it means that when they get into the... when they get into the stuff that could be considered lowbrow, it feels more earned. Does that make sense? And I think...
So you're saying that lowbrow would be a deliberate choice rather than something they're doing is purely to try and entice people into playing the game?
Yeah, more or less. Like, okay, a game like Soul Calibur 4, for example, with Ivy's character design is like, okay, look at these boobs. We're trying to sell you on boobs. Okay, do you like boobs? Yes, you like boobs. Everyone likes boobs. So, buy our game, Whereas, a game that has some sexy stuff in it, but isn't necessarily shoving it into your face from the word go, it feels more like an interesting surprise when it comes up, rather than... something that sets the tone really cynical and marketable from the start. And I guess that makes it feel different.
I guess for me the distinction is because I have some people that I talk to a lot. Cause I use a lot of modding when I'm playing fighting games. I use a lot of different modded costumes, things like that. And a lot of the modders are very much on the side of like we're going to make sexy mods because they want to sell them on their Patreon, which is fine, or because they just like making sexy mods, which is also fine. It's kind of like the guy who directed Nier Automata, who said like I just like girls. You know, why'd you make 2B so sexy? I just like girls.
What's her name who made Bayonetta?
Well, here's the thing. Bayonetta and 2B, yeah, they've got a lot of sex appeal in their designs, but they also kind of have a design that says, okay, let's think about how a woman who wants to look sexy would look. And the result is something more interesting than, just TNA everywhere without much thought.
I actually said that is actually a very good argument. I have not heard that before. Because, a lot of those arguments immediately go to, like, oh, this is SJW or not and whatnot. But it's like, what would a woman look like if she wanted to look sexy? That's actually not a bad way to look at things.
Well, Bayonetta, for all the sexiness that they wanted to inject into the game by design, they had the brains to have a woman actually design the character. So what you get is a character who looks like she acts like a woman having fun with her femininity. It's interesting, actually, how many women I've met in my life who really like Bayonetta. So, it's harder to pull off, but it does broaden the appeal when it's done right.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously not a very new argument. There was a lot of arguments about this sort of thing when Lara Croft got toned down as well. Similar sort of things when she went from having a giant rack to having a very, well, not even like modest rack, like that, she just became more and more progressively modest, but she still had a fairly sizable set of, kahunas or melons or whatever you want to call them. And it was the same sort of thing. It's like you would ask a woman, it's like, do you find that sexist, or would you like want to look like that? And she's like, I'd actually kind of want to look like that a lot of the time. So I mean, there's a lot of arguments being made for and against.
I'm sorry, I just like this moment. Liu Kang's all cool and jumps through the trap while it's moving, and Kung Lao's like, nah, fuck it, I'm stopping the trap.
I play Oddjob. Still.
It's a very Indiana Jones moment.
Anyway, this is the first chapter that lets you pick which character you want to play as for each fight. So you get Liu Kang and Kung Lao here, working as a team.
Yeah.
They do a similar thing with Scorpion and Sub-Zero later on.
And I do like how the outfits that they're using here, because they are the younger versions, are very 90s inspired. Like, Liu Kang's wearing like the leather vest and whatnot, which, that's very dated.
One thing I do like is that we have like evil Scorpion here from the past, but modern Scorpion is actually teaming up with his arch nemesis Sub-Zero and being really chill about it.
Yeah, he's super chill about it. Yeah.
I mean, just going on 90s Asex again, classic Scorpion is also very 90s with just very bright yellow.
Yeah. Well, all the not ninjas have their ninja outfits as alts, but the default designs, the future designs for Scorpion and Sub-Zero both have their faces visible, which, I like it. The classic ninja-like designs of the Lin Kuei are simple by design because they were designed for 16-bit sprites that were basically photographed by men in cheap men in cheap costumes.
Yeah, so, and that's why they're bright yellow, bright blue, green.
And they've done some things to spice up the design of the costumes. As you can see, it's a lot more elaborate than it was in the 90s, but it still does have the feeling of Sub-Zero being Sub-Zero and Scorpion being yellow Sub-Zero. So having these more unique designs in the modern games helps it feel like they are individual characters rather than recolors, which is what they were originally. They were recolors. There was, for some reason, we found it extremely cool whenever they came up with another colored ninja, but
you got yellow Scorpion, blue Scorpion, green Scorpion, black Scorpion, purple Scorpion.
Yeah, them palette swaps.
I can't believe that they kept Noob Saibot around for so long and turned him into an actual legitimate character when he's like, what is his name, an anagram for one of the devs?
Yeah,
something?
Ed Boon and John Tobias.
Yeah, he's like, that's like, he might as well he was kind of an Easter egg character, really. He wasn't a serious character, but now he is. It's weird what they've done with this series over time.
Yeah, Mortal Kombat has a history of incorporating Easter egg characters in the games from rumors. Ermac is the same way. Ermac appeared as basically when you turn on the original Mortal Kombat arcade machine, it would go through like its boot up sequence. It would show you the number of times each character was used, and at the bottom of that it had one called Ermac, which was basically, it actually meant error macro. So how many times an error had been registered when trying to select a character, but people thought that was a character called Ermac, and he became Ermac in later games.
Yeah. I like this moment where the bad guys actually have to save a couple of the good guys because their future selves are on that side and they need to keep them around to guard the hourglass, so they can't let the past selves die. Why they had to lift the cage, I don't know. Maybe they just had one lever to work with and that was it. If they could have imprisoned these two, that would have been obviously the best outcome for the bad guys, but they had to let them go because their revenant selves from the future would disappear if they died here.
Yeah, there's some very questionable characters. I mean, maybe I haven't played the entire story mode 3 yet, so this might be revealed later on, but right now, it's like, why would... I get why Kronika brought people from the past into the future to help her protect her timeline horsefuckery bullshit, but why did she bring good guys back along with the bad guys?
She probably didn't really bring them back by choice, just... they get thrown into the mix together because they're all integral to the timeline she's trying to change, you know? So
yeah,
it's like,
I mean, that's one way to look at
she does her magic fuckery with the hourglass, and then all of the temporal distortion happens at once, and she can't really undo it until she successfully changes the timeline permanently. So
I don't know. I mean, I'm not really like up on the Mortal Kombat lore, so I don't know how effective the Mortal Kombat Elder Gods are in that regard.
Not very effective, I don't think. But I mean, just going by the track record.
Yeah, they have a long history of not being very effective, so I get that.
I keep forgetting how long that bicycle kick can just go on for. I haven't figured out how to make it go on that long now.
You can meter burn it, so basically every time you meter burn it, you can meter burn it twice, and it'll extend it even further.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I figured that out pretty early on. Yeah, you can just like pile an extra bit of damage on by meter burning it.
Right.
As it goes, because that's one of the interesting mechanics about this game, and like a lot of basically any fighting game has a meter built into it. Like for burning for resources, will have that meter build as you get hit or as you are aggressive. But in Mortal Kombat 11, that meter builds by itself regardless of whether you're being aggressive or not, which is an interesting design choice.
Oh, it charges over time. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. So you will always get meter to burn regardless of whether you're defending or not.
Mm.
I imagine that was an idea that's kind of a comeback mechanic.
Well,
so you can kind of just not have to worry about either, or you can focus a bit more on just pure defense and get something you can rack up big damage with.
It makes sense in Mortal Kombat's case because it's harder to turtle in a game with an awkward block button in the first place. So if you're being defensive, you've probably earned it.
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah, that is definitely, and the other reason as well is that one of the problems that high level Mortal Kombat play had when you look at like tournament level and nationals, Evo level, that kind of thing, is that in previous Mortal Kombat games the combo breaker system was tied to the 1 meter that you had for doing X-ray attacks. So you could either break a combo by using 2 bars or do an X-ray attack by using 3 bars. So people would always have at least 2 bars on hand and just keep it, and they would sit on it to break a combo if they ever needed to. So you would never see X-ray attacks in high-level Mortal Kombat. Whereas in this game, they've separated fatal blows and meter into the 2 different categories, so that way you can do a fatal blow without burning your meter, which would save you from being comboed.
Yeah. Cetrion. I remember one of Johnny Cage's intro dialogues when he encounters Cetrion is to comment that Cetrion's name sounds like a damn insurance company. He's right.
So it sounds like a European like small car that has very good fuel economy.
That's kind of, yeah.
Well, like the 2-seater ones?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. The new Cetrion from BMW. Drive it today.
It goes like 40 miles an hour.
Actually, I think that when Cetrium was first announced, everyone was making the comparison to Korra.
I can see that.
He's basically the Avatar.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I guess so.
Convenient of them to make a perfectly sized hole for us to get through.
No, just have to duck down a little bit.
Very thoughtful.
This guy is a new character, right?
Yeah, he is.
I like how he's low key this big beefy ass black guy with a blue heart on his chest. Just like, okay, sure.
Yeah, and he was also one of the sticks. You know, we're gonna keep going back to the sexism and SJW thing. I think through this playthrough, but he was one of the sticks that people were using to beat the game with because they're like, oh, why are all the female characters all covered up and this dude's walking around basically in his underwear?
I wouldn't say they're all covered up. I mean, ninja ladies are still ninja ladies. They're still showing quite a bit of thigh there. Still in pretty tight clothes.
Ooh.
I don't know, this feels kind of like an imaginary thing, kind of like how people were ragging on DOA 6 for breast reductions when they haven't really been reduced at all. And all the costumes that you wanted back are in the game still. And
I think that was more of a direct... It feels like a more of a direct response with that, though, because I think that they showed off some very tame stuff just to see how people would react to it. And when they reacted very negatively, they're like, oh, no, wait, we still have sex appeal, look at this!
I don't know. Most of the characters that they were introducing late into DOA 5's life cycle are characters that only have story significance in 6, so it's clear that they were introducing them for 6 and just introducing them into 5 to give themselves something to make money off of in the meanwhile. And Honaka was part of that group.
Oh, yeah.
Oh boy, mirror match.
Can we just talk about how fucking gorgeous the stage is?
It's nice to see some color. I remember in, I think it was 9, where all the stages were really bland looking.
Yeah, I remember that being a thing. It's part of why I didn't really see any appeal to getting 9. Like, it was on my radar. I kind of wanted to get it, but at the same time, the visual look of the game didn't interest me. Between the character designs being kind of generic, in that we're trying to sell you a game based on how cool and or sexy everything looks, to the stages not being particularly interesting.
My fun story with 9 is that 9 was actually banned in Australia when it was initially released because we didn't have a adult rating for video games because the politicians were like, oh, video games are for kids, so we don't need one. So any game that was like, yeah, that was the logic, that you could not go above a 15 age rating for a game because because you shouldn't need an 18 plus one. So this game was actually, banned.
I've heard stories about Australia's weird-ass rules regarding video games, but that's a little, I mean... See...
They have fixed it now. We do have an 18 plus rating now, but at the time when 9 was released, we did not.
Yeah. Meanwhile, in America, we've had an 18 plus rating forever, but stores just won't stock it, so we might as well not.
Well, mature is effectively 17 plus.
Yeah,
AO
I know. AO is like for explicit, sexy stuff, but the upshot is that anything that would get you an adult rating is something that a game developer or publisher doesn't want to do because stores won't stock games with that rating. So there's this awkward sort of M-rated barrier where anything that goes above that is something we straight up can't do.